Hey, folks, today's program sponsored by one of our favorite sponsors, sunsetlakecbd.com. Use the coupon code LEFTISBEST. You will get 20% off. Sunset Lake has great tinctures, CBD, multiple strengths per dropper, essentially. They have 3 different flavors. They have it with melatonin, so it helps you sleep. This is my go-to sleep remedy, folks. The melatonin, the CBD. It's also occasionally I'll have a little bit of CBD, like when things are getting a little bit rough and I want to relax a little bit. But they also have things like CBD fudge and CBD coffee, which is a great weekend brew. They also have smokables, which you can mix with other smokables for an entourage effect, or just have one of their pre-rolls, or not, roll it yourself after dinner one night or something like that.
Yeah.
That's a nice relaxing. But also, the best thing is at Sunset Lake CBD, their product has an incredible amount of integrity. All third-party tested. You can see the breakdown of all the elements of the CBD that you are ingesting. And they also use no pesticides. That's right. Integrated pest management is the way that they keep the pests off of their plants. They also use regenerative farming practices. They use great business practices, $20 minimum wage, mostly employee owned. And most importantly, perhaps, they are movement partners. They have dedicated, I should say, donated thousands upon thousands of dollars. Tens of thousands of dollars to things like strike funds, refugee resettlement, food pantries, Vermont flood relief, carceral reform, give directly. I mean, thousands upon thousands of dollars. Great bunch of folks. Check them out, sunsetlakecbd.com. They're up in Burlington or near Burlington, Vermont. Just all around great company. sunsetlakecbd.com. Use the coupon code LEFTISBEST, 20% off. Now, time for the show.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder, where every day's Casual Friday. That means Monday is Casual Monday, Tuesday, Casual Tuesday, Wednesday, Casual Hump Day, Thursday, Casual Thurs, that's what we call it, and Friday, Casual Shabbat. The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
It is Friday, November 3rd, 2023. My name is Sam Seder. This is the 5-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, Jacob Silverman. On the Sam Bankman-Fried's 7 guilty verdicts, I should say guilty verdict on 7 counts of fraud and conspiracy. Meanwhile, Anthony Blinken in Israel again as pressure for a ceasefire mounts in the Senate. UN Human Rights Office says the Jabalia refugee strikes may be a war crime. House passes $14 billion in standalone Israeli military aid. And somehow, Democrats plan to end run around Tommy Tuberville's military promotion block. FTC accuses Amazon of a secret algorithm to fix prices and of destroying evidence. Speaking of destroying evidence, Eric Adams had to postpone his trip to Washington because his chief fundraiser's house was raided by the FBI in an illegal donation investigation.
Gosh, crime is just out of control in the city.
It totally is. Ivanka Trump loses a bid to put off testifying because of childcare issues. As Uday and Kusei Trump lose it under questioning. 3-judge panel from the Eighth Circuit overrules the EPA on chlorovirus, which is a pediatric neurotoxin. Overrules their ban, I should say. Unemployment raises to 3.9%. Non-farm payrolls only increased by 150,000 jobs. So the Fed's plan is working to weaken labor. All this and more on today's Majority Report. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for joining us. It is Casual Friday. I'm wearing a soft-collared shirt. I managed to find the long-sleeve version of that.
I'm a fan of that shirt. It's a classy shirt.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
I was wondering why you were asking what the sons of Saddam Hussein's were named.
Yeah, I was trying to remember. Yeah.
But I didn't know what the punchline would be, and good job. It was good.
I appreciate that. Yeah.
Yeah.
I took that one out of the. I feel like that's an old one, but I don't know. Maybe not.
Referencing Uday and Kusei?
Yes.
Yeah,
Well, or just, that maybe that was used a long time ago. I don't know how it wasn't. Feels like it should have been.
Yeah.
But nevertheless, we got a lot to get to today. And very excited to have Jacob Silverman on. He'll be on shortly. He's been doing great reporting on Sam Bankman-Fried and all of the crypto stuff. But he also, starting Monday, is going to be joining the AM Quickie.
I mean, what a get.
It's a huge get.
Jacob is one of the best, writers out there. Great follow. People should check out his work. So feel lucky that he's going to be kind of working with us on the AM Quickie.
Yep.
That's
good
what
stuff.
it means to be a mighty man of valor.
You can go to amquickie.com. I've been reading a lot about, actually, what's his face? Who's it? Yeah, Holly. And going back and seeing the stuff that he was saying just like 4 or 5 years ago, he was not so much of a populist then. It was a little weird. He had a big transformance. Well, to a certain extent.
Yeah.
Let's get to this. Yesterday, I guess it was yesterday now, Dick Durbin, in the morning.
Yeah, we opened the show with that. Right, he was the first to call for a ceasefire.
He was the first to call for a ceasefire. Now, Dick Durbin is not doing that without permission from Joe Biden. And Dick Durbin was also, I'm sure you mentioned, was also the first person ever to be recruited by AIPAC.
Wow. I did not
to run
that.
In the Senate. Now that was 40 some odd years ago, I think it was.
Man, I was going to say, how old is Dick Durbin?
Yeah.
79.
Old enough to be the number 2 Democrat in the Senate in terms of seniority and in leadership structure, which makes his call for a ceasefire even more impactful than most people saying so.
Well, what it really does in my mind is it I guess it was back in the 70s and 80s. It was in 1982 as a House candidate. Durbin was endorsed by AIPAC. What it indicates to me is that this is where the White House wants to go in some fashion, because there's just Dick Durbin would not be out there saying this when the White House is not saying this, if this wasn't a way in which they go. This is very much like when Sean Fain invites Joe Biden to come to the picket lines, that invitation is probably the idea of the White House.
Right. They've had conversations before.
And so Dick Durbin does this in the morning, and then by later in the afternoon, you have Chris Murphy, who is considered sort of like the one of the more prominent voices in the Democratic Party in foreign relations, as it were. And here is, and note, the difference between Dick Durbin saying this first, and let's say Bernie Sanders saying this first, Dick Durbin opens up a lot more space for people to come in and also say they want a ceasefire. Here is Chris Murphy on Chris Hayes's program last night, ostensibly to talk about Tommy Tuberville, but really, I think, to get this a ceasefire call out there.
Today, you released a statement in which you said the following: the current rate of civilian death inside Gaza is unacceptable and unsustainable. I urge Israel to immediately reconsider its approach and shift to a more deliberate, proportionate counterterrorism campaign, surgically targeting Hamas and Islamic Jihad leaders and terrorist infrastructure, while more highly prioritizing the safety of civilians in accordance with the law of armed conflict. Why did you issue that statement?
So there's no doubt Israel has the right to defend itself, and there's no doubt that Hamas is responsible for these civilian casualties because they hide themselves, their weapons, their infrastructure inside civilian buildings, mosques, schools, and hospitals. But Israel does have a responsibility to weigh the cost to civilians against the ability to target Hamas leaders. And I think when you are talking about 8,000 Palestinian civilians being killed, 3,000 children, there's no way but to come to the conclusion that the cost to civilians has been too high and that Israel has to reconsider the way in which it balances its desire to go after and get Hamas and the damage being done to civilians. The moral cost is just too high when 3,000 Palestinian children have died, but the strategic cost is too high as well, because as we learned in Afghanistan, when you are too casual or too permissive about civilian casualties, that ends up being recruitment material for the very terrorist groups you are fighting. And so for me, it was important today to say that we have reached a point at which the rate of civilian harm here is too high for Israel to sustain, for the world to sustain, and it's time for them to change course and be much more targeted in their decisions about when they go after terrorists in civilian, heavy civilian population centers.
Now, I mean, it's certainly not hard to sort of take exception to the, sort of the bloodlessness of this. But nevertheless, the point being is that this is the beginning of, at the very least, the pressure that's going to come from the United States, and it's going to build. Blinken is in Israel again with sort of like the obligatory, we stand behind Israel, et cetera, but he is there looking for his, humanitarian pause or whatever it is that they're calling. The reason why they're afraid of saying the word ceasefire is because they want the option of going back in, but this is not sustainable.
Yeah.
And I think from a moral standpoint, we've already far surpassed like any justification for what's happening. And frankly, I think from a strategic standpoint, the idea that there's not going to be a generation or two of these under 18-year-old kids who grow up to seek revenge for this. I think that's also hard to imagine that that's not going to happen. But
the trauma alone, the trauma of seeing this alone, and if you're just thinking and you only care about Israelis, which I don't agree with, obviously, but just from the perspective of just protecting Israel, this is not the way to go.
No, yeah, exactly. That's the strategic failure of this. And I would also add, increasingly there has been talk, and I have no way of analyzing this, but we certainly saw it with the Russian military, that in many respects they weren't sort of up to the task that everyone assumed that they were in terms of Ukraine. There was a video going around of a Hamas fighter putting essentially like some type of explosive device on a tank, on an Israeli tank, and then running back to the position and firing a shoulder fired anti-tank RPG. And that is an odd thing to be able to be happening. It suggests that maybe there isn't sort of like infantry around providing support for these tanks. I don't know.
That's what
I'm
Mike
not,
Preisner said.
I'm
yeah.
certainly not a, some type of military. I don't know much, beyond a couple of things I've read, but it is quite possible, and it really hasn't been anything that anyone has talked about, as far as I can see, that the IDF of 2023 is not the IDF of 1985 or 1975. You bring back 300,000 reservists. These are people who, they've been working in tech businesses. They've been working. I mean, this is not the same sort of like a type of military. Plus, the other thing is that when you have a military, and I believe this came up maybe some time ago, and I'm not exactly sure in what context, but I'm talking like 5 or 6 years ago. When you have a military whose primary function has been to basically go around and protect settlers who are taking shots at people, and to go and dispossess people of their homes, when you're going up against civilians, they lose their sort of like training edge, as it were, and begin to sort of like get too comfortable in a dynamic where, we were just talking about that clip of Gavin Newsom playing basketball with some kids. Like if you do that all the time, your game doesn't get as strong. And the
IDF forces that are kind of in active duty roles, or were before October 7th, a lot of it was patrolling and working inside of Gaza as like an occupying force
in West Bank,
in the West Bank as an occupying force versus the active combat that you described.
Exactly.
And the questions about the military failures go back to the 7th, where the border was unsecure and they were helping settlers in the West Bank.
They're doing exactly what you said, yeah.
Right. So, that is instead of what could have prevented the attack. But just really quickly, because you mentioned Blinken, this is a market shift in tone. I want to read this quote really quickly. I've seen images of Palestinian children, young boys and girls, pulled from the wreckage of buildings. When I see that, when I look into their eyes through the TV screen, I see my own children. That is not, look, again, we need a ceasefire, but this past 3 or so days, as you say, Sam, it's the first time we've seen some tapping of the brakes from the United States' perspective. And what Blinken is saying there is a 180-degree difference from what he had been saying last week. So the pressure is getting to people. It's getting to them, thankfully. Obviously, it's becoming untenable. The Israeli propaganda effort isn't working when you see these children, or a father saying, I lost all my 3 children, wailing, where you see, kids saying, did I die? Am I going to my graveyard? And people pulling them out of rubble saying, no, you're okay. And you just see the dust and hear of people talking about the smelling of carcasses, and there's 97% of the water is brackish and not clean, and they can't even get rid of the dust in their eyes and mouths because they don't have water to drink. Surgeries being done without anesthesia. This is the reality, right? And so this is like the first time I feel like in weeks that we've had any movement here, to your point.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see though. But
Netanyahu after this said, I reject calls for a ceasefire. So
Blinken should have just put the tweet back up that he tweeted like 3 days after the thing, which is like, I've been talking to Turkey and we're like, hey, we should do a ceasefire and negotiate for hostages. And the
hostages need to be protected as well.
Precisely.
They are in Gaza, presumably.
Exactly.
Right.
We'll see. But again, it is very helpful to have this pressure on. These senators are not just being moved by pictures of Palestinians getting killed. They're getting moved because they're seeing a shift in the where the public is on this.
And thanks particularly to Rashida Tlaib.
Yes, her bravery and Jewish Voice for Peace, and If Not Now, and all of the Arab groups backing this. There is a major march happening tomorrow in D.C. People can look that up. If you are in the D.C. area and you want to support the Palestinian cause and protecting these civilians, these historic demonstrations are also having this effect of ramping up the pressure.
Without a doubt. 2 p.m. on the Freedom Plaza.
Yeah.
And, these marches are important. It's important to get out there. People getting arrested in, Grand Central Station, and all of this is having an impact. Hope springs eternal, but it's really been just so devastating to watch the just enormous amount of pain that's been going on. It's just, the images have just been horrible.
Suffering by our tax dollar.
All right. Well, we've got some sponsors, and then we're going to be talking about Sam Bankman-Fried with Jacob Silverman, who I know has been covering the trial every day, and certainly has been writing a lot about cryptocurrency and casino capitalism. And I'm very curious to talk to him about the sort of like donor aspects of Sam Bankman-Fried, because all of that money that he was sloshing around, well, ironically, some of it went, I think, to Eric Adams, or at least, because Eric Adams is so against crime.
Yep.
Sometimes, though, what you need to do is you need to be one to know one.
Oh, he's deep undercover.
Deep undercover.
He's a former cop. He knows what he's doing.
He knows what
Don't
he's doing.
question.
Meanwhile, today's one of today's sponsors. I'm not going to read this one, but it's Hello Tushy, folks. Look, you've heard me talk about this really ever since COVID. I think it was during the sort of the lockdowns and the great toilet paper shortage of 2020. I had maybe used a bidet once or twice before then. And the bidets I had used were like these like hugely expensive ones from Japan, because they were like people that I knew who had a fancy toilet. Yeah. And they were fun. And I do remember the experience being pretty great. But I'll tell you something, once you use a bidet for a couple of times, everything else just seems like you're moving backwards in time. Like we're moving back into the Stone Ages. It makes total sense. When you get dirt on your hand, you don't take a dry piece of paper and wipe your hand off. No, you use water. And that's what the Hello Tushy bidet attachment does for you. They have over 100,000 five-star reviews. You can see why millions of real pooping human beings already love Hello Tushy bidet. This is the thing. One of the things I love about this. If you know how to change out your toilet seat, you know how to put on a Hello Tushy bidet attachment. No extra plumbing, no extra electricity. Literally can put it on in about 10 minutes. It has a 30-day risk-free guarantee and a 12-month warranty. After 30 days, if you have not seen the light, as it were, you can return it, but you won't. Hello Tushy's bidet, fresh stream of water, cleans your bum 2 times better than wiping. I don't know how they measure that, but for me, it's just, it's hands down. Literally. I guess literally, and yeah. Using a Hello Tushy bidet also prevents poop particles from spreading from your hands and everything you touch. Because all you do is you wash yourself, turn a knob, wash yourself, you get washed, then you just pat yourself dry. Take care of yourself from the bottom up this holiday season. It's a great gift, incidentally. It's a great gift.
Practical.
It's totally practical, and it's something that people wouldn't think to get for themselves. And then all of a sudden, you've changed their lives. Visit hellotushy.com. I'm not joking about that.
I know you're not.
Visit hellotushy.com/majority. Use the promo code majority for 10% off your first order. Don't miss out on their Spend and Get event going on now through November 18th. I'm not sure what that Spend and Get event is, but check it out. 10% off with the coupon code majority at hellotushy.com/majority. Also, and we'll put the podcast, the link in the podcast and YouTube descriptions. I have always had trouble finding clothes, dressing myself. Well, not dressing myself, but finding clothes to wear, particularly like on the more sort of like, you go into a nice dinner, you go into, you go into a function where, people expect you to dress up. I have
You're sartorially challenged, as you
I'm
like to say.
sartorially challenged. I grew up in an era where like grunge was everything, and like, but now I want, and people dress nicer now, I think in general, but not formal, but like nice. And for me, the way that I have achieved that is through Rhone. Rhone's commuter collection is the most comfortable, breathable, and flexible set of products known to man. And here is why. Because Rhone, like I say, gets you ready for any type of occasion. I have worn the same Rhone shirt literally from a funeral to a fancy dinner, through the day. No smelling, no sweating, and it's incredibly comfortable. It feels like a tech shirt or whatever they call that, but it looks like a dress shirt. And they have not only dress shirts in that way, they have comfortable pants, they have quarter zips, and they have polos. They also have like sport coat and slacks, which I'm working on. Rhone has a 4-way stretch fabric, provides breathability and flexibility. So you could play golf in it, you can run around in it, frankly, and still looks really sharp. And here's the beauty of it. It doesn't need to be ironed. Take it out of the dryer, hang it up for 15, 20 minutes, and it looks great.
And if you're traveling, that's a big
Huge,
deal. Going to
huge,
something
huge.
formal, like a wedding,
Huge.
perfect for that.
Huge. And any wrinkles, as soon as you put it on, they're gone. It has Gold Fusion anti-odor technology, so you're smelling fresh all day. Rhone is 100% machine washable. Goodbye dry cleaning expenses. I love this stuff. All the shirts I brought and pants to Vegas were Rhone. I've made the move.
Amazing.
Didn't have to iron. Huge for me. Commuter collection, get you through any work day and straight into whatever comes next. Head to Rhone.com/majority report. Use the promo code majority report. Save 20% off your entire order. That's 20% off your entire order when you head to Rhone, RHONE.com/majority report. Use the code majority report. It is time to find your corner office comfort. All right, quick break. And when we come back, Jacob Silverman, co-author of Easy Money, Cryptocurrency, and Casino Capitalism, The Golden Age of Fraud with Ben McKenzie, and host of the Naked Emperor podcast on CBC. And now also one of our writers on the AM Quickie.
Ooh.
We'll be right back. We are back. Sam Seder, Emma Vigland on the Majority Report. Joining us now, Jacob Silverman, co-author of Easy Money, Cryptocurrency, Casino Capitalism, and the Golden Age of Fraud, co-written with Ben McKenzie, and host of the Naked Emperor podcast on CBC. And also starting on Monday, our one of our writers on the AM Quickie. Very excited to have you on board, Jacob.
Thank you. That's the official announcement, I believe.
And there it is. That's the official announcement. And it was also super timely, and also just sort of like good manners for Sam Bankman-Fried to get convicted today, so that you can focus. You don't have to cover the trial as much anymore.
I have to admit, personally, it's a little bit of a relief to hopefully move on from this in some way.
Will you walk us through just sort of like what he was found guilty on and what exactly happened here?
Sure. So Sam Bankman-Fried was he's 31 now, but he was the founder and CEO of FTX, one of the biggest crypto exchanges in the world, where people bought and sold crypto, and also bought and sold sort of risky products like derivatives related to crypto. And then he had a hedge fund called Alameda Research. And for many people, he was the face of crypto in the United States, and perhaps in the English-speaking world. He was throwing money around everywhere, including on Capitol Hill. And about a year ago yesterday, really, his companies began to collapse when there was a balance sheet leaked that showed that they basically had a very rickety foundation, mostly made up of FTT, a token that Sam Bankman-Fried invented. It was the house token for FTX. And eventually he was arrested in December of last year and charged with 7 felonies and brought to the US from the Bahamas, where his company was based. And he's really charged with some basic financial crimes that you might see on Wall Street. Securities fraud, commodities fraud, conspiracy to commit money laundering, and other conspiracy charges that reflect the fact that he did this with at least 3 other people who have already pled guilty.
Was this a situation like when I hear this story a little bit, as far as I've read into it, which I admittedly is not that much. A buddy of mine, we've had him as a frequent guest. We haven't had him on in a while. Wrote about a guy named Sam Israel, who had a hedge fund that he thought he had figured out the market, and started to realize like he was underperforming. So he started to sort of like fix the books and tell everybody that he was making money, and he kept looking for ways of like, and so he was sort of basically running a Ponzi scheme in terms of returns, and just thought like, I'll score big over here and then I'll just put the money back in. And is that what happened here? Or was this a situation where he was just like pulling money out of his clients' funds to just, I don't know, live in the Bahamas or party or basically, in many ways change the course of our politics for several years?
Very much so. A lot of frauds start the way you just described, which is, hey, I'll dip in a little bit, or we have some short-term problems. Let's, do something illegal or move some money around, something like that. So the basic thing that happened here was that FTX had billions of dollars in customer funds. People deposited US dollars to buy crypto, and that money was supposed to stay there in those bank accounts and not be moved, so that when people wanted to withdraw, they could withdraw. And that's how the crypto industry is supposed to work. What turned out was that basically Sam Bankman-Fried was moving billions of dollars from FTX to Alameda, his hedge fund. And as you said, he was buying luxury real estate. He was investing in companies. He was throwing money around in Capitol Hill, making tens of millions of dollars in donations. So whatever initially animated this, whether it was, hey, to get past some bad trades or some short-term losses that happened to Alameda Research, his hedge fund, it grew into something much more. Even in court, Caroline Ellison, the former CEO of Alameda Research, who dated Sam Bankman-Fried, she said that when he started FTX, he saw it as a source for cash for Alameda. So even if initially perhaps there was a little bit of tiptoeing into fraudulence, it became just an open door. And really, actually, a lot of the money never quite got to FTX. FTX customers were instructed to deposit their money into bank accounts controlled by Alameda. Again, this was all controlled by Sam Bankman-Fried because he owned both companies, but they were supposed to be operating separately, and he simply was never doing that.
So if I understand it, this the FTX didn't statutorily could not function like a bank, right? I mean, I put my money into a bank account. they loan it out to other people, and if it's a commercial bank, I guess, or an investment bank, they will use it for their products, and they need to have certain capital requirements. They can't pull out all that money, but they can pull out some, enough to keep it in there. But under statutorily, FTX was not allowed to do any of that. It all had to just sit there as if it was like a brokerage account.
Right. And
okay.
FTX often acted like a bank, but really an offshore, unregulated one. And, if we're talking about fraud is basically promising one thing, especially in contracts or legal agreements, and then doing another in private. It requires a certain amount of intent. And I think that's what the prosecution proved here, was just that simply he was doing this very much intentionally and didn't see FTX as this separate concern that where the money should stay put. He thought he had free access to it.
Can you talk about some of that evidence of intent? Because my understanding is it was pretty brazen.
It was. I mean, this is really a story about ego and the sheer presumptuousness, I think, of Sam Bankman-Fried, and which extends from, I think, the milieu in which he grew up and the sort of coddled, privileged nature of his life. But Sam never really seemed to have a problem with breaking the rules or bending them or just simply overlooking them. And I think what we found in court was that, of course, that finally caught up to him. There were 3 former executives there, including Caroline Ellison, the former CEO of Alameda, who had pled guilty to these same crimes, to doing them with Sam at his behest. And then they testified against him. They were all, to be honest, they're all sort of math or engineering nerds, and they have that kind of precision in how they testify. Of course, they worked with the prosecutors beforehand, but they gave clear answers. They were very specific. Sam told me this at this point, in this room. And then there was a lot of documentary evidence. There was screenshots of Signal chats, of Slack chats. There were emails. There were Google documents. There really was just a lot to show that this wasn't just some accident or some oversight. This was pretty much directed. Sam chose when money moved and how it was spent.
And that's why it was just such a shockingly quick kind of prosecution. 5 months, or maybe actually, I'm sorry, it was 5 hours that the jury deliberated on all of this. I'm not exactly sure how long the whole process was, but for this kind of financial investigation and the amount of money that we're talking about here, this kind of thing usually lasts years, right?
Right. So the whole is something like $9 billion. They moved more than that to Alameda, but the whole in the end was about $9 billion. And I think the reason why this stuff went so quickly was, one, you had a very motivated prosecution. Hey, this was a big disaster for a lot of American consumers. It was very embarrassing for the American political elite, which took a lot of money from Sam Bankman-Fried. And then there was just all this evidence. And you had 3 inside co-conspirators who were ready to cooperate. We heard from Nishad Singh, a former executive there, and all these people were good friends with Sam Bankman-Fried. Some of them looked up to him. But Nishad Singh had said he was suicidal in the aftermath of the company's collapse. And when he really found out what happened, I think all these people were complicit. They certainly pleaded guilty, but some of them didn't know the extent of things or where Sam was moving the money. They kind of just went along with it. Someone like Gary Wong, the co-founder of both of Sam's companies, he said that Bankman-Fried would tell him, sign this loan. It's going to be in your name, and we're taking out a loan for $50 or $100 million. And Wong would just do it. But what we heard in the testimony from people is that, yes, they're complicit, but there was also some relief. Caroline Ellison has said that she was relieved when the whole thing collapsed, that the lies could sort of end. And I think the main distinction you see here is that Sam Bankman-Fried didn't seem to feel anything, really. As by his own admission, he has difficulty feeling empathy for others, and he seemed to think that this could go on forever. Whereas his co-conspirators, at least at the very end, they took some responsibility and showed that this was weighing on them because this was a disaster and this was a criminal operation.
But I thought he was an effective altruist. He's not able to feel empathy for others. That's what he branded himself as in order to, get some at least temporary green light for his crimes.
And I think we've seen between his interview with Vox last year when he sort of said that all the effective altruism stuff was possibly BS, and then in the trial where we learned that his image as sort of this sort of awkward, funny-looking CEO who was a little bit eccentric, this was all very calculated. And I mean, you can psychologize however much you want and say this guy's a sociopath or something like that, but I think it's fair to say by now that his public image was very carefully constructed, and that effective altruism, well, one, is probably not a very legitimate philosophy, but it was for him certainly a cover for this moving money around and for greed.
Yeah, I want to ask you, because my understanding is there was no way he was going to be prosecuted, according to Tucker Carlson. He was all going to be
Elon Musk too.
Elon Musk. I mean, some of the greatest minds in the country told us that this was an impossibility. They said this only, I guess, what was it, 6 to 8 months ago or something. So it's rare that you get the opportunity to test your theses so quickly. But how much of that was like, I mean, you just said this was a cultivated sort of image. How conscious was he? What was the purpose of all of that political influence he bought? You know, I want to talk about, I want to go into this a little bit. I don't know how much of that reporting you have done, but, a guy we've had on the program multiple times over the years, McKelvey, who started Data Progress, apparently was a big recipient of his funds. A lot of the sort of like centrist popularists received some of this money or were backed in there. Like, how much of these political and he also gave money to Republicans as well. How much of that money that he was spending was he wanted to impact politics in some specific way, or how much of it was part to cultivate his image and to protect him from something like this?
Right. I think it was very much a matter of self-interest. He had said to other people, and this has been reported on, it was mentioned in court by Caroline Ellison, I believe, that he thought the ROI, the return on investment, which is how he saw the world for political donations, was very high, that you could spend a small amount of money and get a lot of influence in return. And I think just based on the legislation that was moving through Congress before this company collapsed, one bill was to regulate crypto was called Sam's bill, sort of colloquially on Capitol Hill, that this was very much about expanding his business. We have to remember that FTX, while it had a U.S. exchange, it was a lot smaller. The main exchange, FTX.com or FTX Global, was based in the Bahamas, and it sold risky products like derivatives that aren't allowed in the U.S. You can't sell those crypto derivatives products. So it very much seems to me, based on what I've learned, that this was about legitimizing crypto and finding a regulatory regime that was very friendly to him, hopefully running through the CFTC, and that would allow him to bring this business onshore. I mean, whether his claims to really care about pandemic preparedness and some of these other long-term issues were legitimate, I don't know, but I think we can say that it was certainly mixed up with a lot of corruption. I mean, CoinDesk found that about a third of Congress received donations from FTX, Sam Bankman-Fried, and his various affiliates. And finally, one day before this all went down, I believe it was last summer 2022, I asked Sam and Brian Salem, one of his top executives, who was sort of the front man for the Republican donations. He had just announced a new donation to some right-wing Republicans who were against COVID mitigation efforts and things like that. I said, how can you guys be donating to these people? This was on Twitter. I'm not sure if the exchange still exists because Sam deleted a lot of tweets, but these are folks who, how could they believe in pandemic preparedness when they don't believe in universal health care or even that COVID is potentially real? And they had a sort of shifty answer, both of them. But I think we have to understand that while sometimes you may hear things about, it's about pandemic preparedness or even this vague idea of saving the world, there really were a lot of short-term monetary interests, I think, being satisfied by this political influence campaign.
Well, I'm curious how many politicians we are no longer sort of pushing crypto. There was a couple of Democratic politicians. I think was it Gillibrand and was it
Booker was kind of interested for a little bit.
There was somebody else too. They were talking about maybe even as a retirement scheme.
Yes. Gillibrand went on TV and said people should put their retirement in crypto.
Is she doing that anymore? Is she like pushing those ads as much?
I haven't heard as much lately. I mean, things have shifted. I mean, I think a lot of politicians kind of walked away with their tail between their legs. But other things have happened too. Now there's a little bit more talk about crypto being used to fund illicit activity or terrorism. It
Really?
does contribute to that in some ways. But so you have someone like Cynthia Loomis, who was a laser-eyed Bitcoin fanatic, is now saying, "Hey, we need to investigate Tether." A major and very suspicious offshore crypto firm that did a lot of business with Sam Bankman-Fried. So the landscape has certainly changed. I still wouldn't say we're beyond sort of the crypto-led influence campaign. Now Coinbase has really stepped up. I've heard that they're going to be meeting with lawmakers in Pennsylvania soon, and they're doing things on Capitol Hill and going state by state. So they're trying to sort of take the mantle as the responsible regulated crypto exchange that can now help shape this new regulatory regime. And they still might get what they want.
But
How much of what Bankman-Fried did was a function of crypto, as opposed to a function of the sexiness around crypto, and what he was doing, you could do with what he was doing was basically what you could do with a hedge fund on some level, I guess, in terms of like the fraud was not necessarily particularly crypto centric as much as it was maybe he didn't get the scrutiny that he deserved because it was in this sort of like new sector.
Yeah, I think we've seen this growing number of cases around crypto, not just SBF. And what I think we now understand is that a lot of existing laws can apply here, and that basically people are usually committing bank fraud, securities fraud, money laundering, crimes that might involve crypto, but are very familiar from traditional finance. So in a lot of ways, what Bankman-Fried was doing was he was lying to lenders, he was lying to customers. These are old-fashioned types of fraud. There was a crypto twist, and certainly that hype factor you talked about. And the other thing I would say is he created his own cryptocurrency, FTT, which a lot of exchanges do. And as sort of the in-house token, they give it out as a reward. But what he did was he owned most of the FTT. So on paper, they had a lot of fake money, really, of this token that had this billion-dollar valuation, and they would use that as collateral for loans to take out real dollars from lenders. Of course, it takes two. The lenders had to agree to it. But, that's sort of one of the crypto twists here is that he kind of made his own counterfeit currency and then used it as collateral to borrow real money. And that's something we've seen in other places in crypto. But it's something that Bankman-Fried really took to a higher level.
Well, but I mean, who accepts that as collateral?
Some fools,
Okay,
I would say, and
was
some
gonna
of the venture capitalists or some of the lenders that then testified at his trial. Some of them said, "Hey, if we had known the actual financial condition of his company, we wouldn't have done this." But that's easy
Isn't
to
that
say
their
in retrospect.
job?
I think there was a lot of greed and a lot of this to go around. Yeah, I mean. Now you have some of these VCs like Sequoia. Someone from Sequoia was talking about, hey, we were fooled too. But again, you have really one job, which is due diligence. And it seems like some of these lenders and venture capitalists put their money into more than one fraud.
What's the status, Jacob, of some of the celebrity high-profile endorsers of FTX? Like, is Tom Brady in any of this litigation? Sorry, Sam.
No,
There's a number of lawsuits, and some of them have been combined into sort of this massive lawsuit that I'm forgetting the abbreviation. Something called, I think it's multi-district litigation. So you have a number of these lawsuits kind of put together, all these law firms working together. The celebrities are being sued, the venture capitalists. I think some law firms may be sued down the road. Individuals involved in all this, a spokesman. So some of those lawsuits may settle, or the whole big mound of litigation may settle. And I expect the celebrities will be okay in the end. But, a lot of people want accountability here. I think that's another reason why you saw this trial go quickly. And there is accountability to call for it from these celebrities, from people who should know better or have better lawyers or better business managers. And they simply allowed themselves to go along with something that was a fraud nearly from the beginning.
Jacob, lastly, I have about $150,000 worth of NFTs. Is now a good time to sell?
I might hold on to see if the market improves a little bit. I think they're probably down about 97 to 99%.
Sam, I told you not to go in on those
Does
apes.
someone have a calculator I could borrow for a second? Jacob Silverman, thanks so much for coming on, talking to us about this, and very excited to read your first dispatch on Monday with the AM Quickie. Folks can check that out, amquickie.com. It's free 3 days a week, and then you can get it 5 days a week for a little change. Jacob, so excited to have you with us, and thanks so much for coming on. And are you going to be able to sort of like move on now from the Sam Bankman-Fried thing? I mean, this has been dominating, I would imagine, dominating your life for a while.
Yeah, I kind of hope so. I admit it gets a little tiring, and he's not the most sympathetic character. I would like to do other varieties of crime and illicit finance. There's going to be more litigation, and there's probably going to be a trial next March, perhaps around the campaign finance charges and this $150 million bribe that his colleagues say he paid to Chinese officials to unlock $1 billion in crypto that had been seized in a money laundering investigation.
Oh, wow.
So this isn't over. I think other people could be charged. Sam's own parents might face legal jeopardy. So I don't know if I can escape this story quite yet.
And we should say people should check out your book too with Ben McKenzie, right? And Easy Money, Cryptocurrency, Casino Capitalism, and the Golden Age of Fraud. If you're like me and you find the story incredibly hilarious.
Yeah, if you want more of it. And,
yeah.
And there's an interview in there with Sam Bankman-Fried from the summer of 2022. And, I don't think we unmasked him as a fraud, but we certainly said, this guy doesn't seem like a genius and can't answer some basic questions. And that's really, I would argue, what was lacking before this all collapsed.
Wow.
Do we know how supportive Sam Bankman-Fried was of Eric Adams?
I couldn't recall the amount of any donations offhand. Adams certainly has crypto ties. He's friendly with Brock Pierce. He flew on his private jet to Puerto Rico. He offered to take some of his salary in Bitcoin. But I can't really say offhand what their relationship might be. I believe they have met, though. And there is a photo of them, actually, I should say, of them having dinner.
Yeah, they had dinner in
I
guess, in March of 2022 of last year. Yes. So
yeah, I think partially to establish jurisdiction, that an FBI agent testified to some of the phone forensics, saying that his Sam Bankman-Fried's phone was ping New York cell towers at these times. And one of those times they mentioned was when he was having dinner with Eric Adams.
Interesting. Maybe we'll hear more about that as time goes on. Jacob Silverman, always a pleasure. Thanks so much, man. And again, psyched to have you on the AM Quickie.
Me too. Thank you.
Thanks, Jacob.
All right, folks, let's...
We got that picture of him and Eric Adams.
Oh, we do?
feel
Let's
like
do
we just
that.
Maybe pull that up if you have it in samples, Bradley.
Really is amazing how quickly this guy rose and how, the freaking Staples Center in Los Angeles is still crypto.com arena. I mean, it really is. And FTX bought the naming rights to the Miami Heat's stadium down in Miami, and they had to get that ripped off too. Like, there was so much fast money pouring in, and it's all just completely evaporated here. God, these people have way too much money. It makes no sense.
Well, it's
the
like
way we
Enron.
structure
He's not
our
wearing a
society.
Majority Report sweatshirt.
I know. I was just
is he?
thinking that.
That's got to be FTX or something, right?
That would be awesome if he was wearing a Majority Report.
You can trust him because he
Sweatshirt.
wears a hoodie.
There it is, Eric Adams. Let's talk. I got a couple of clips that want to go through. This is. Let's play this number 2. There's a. I just ran across this guy on Twitter, and it's been just sort of like horrible to see. A Palestinian journalist in England. His name is Ahmed Al-Nawak, and he has had over 20 members of his family, including I think siblings and his father killed in by Israeli bombing. And
this is a story that is very common. CNN reported on Halloween on the 31st. I'm just finding the exact number here, that 42 relatives were killed in one day in the same family. 3 generations of this one particular family wiped off the map in one day in these Gaza Strips.
I mean, this is
I can't.
And it shouldn't be surprising in the sense of when you start to think about how densely populated Gaza is, when you start to think about how people ended up there. It was basically a refugee camp. The whole thing was basically a refugee camp, starting from early in 1948, prior to Israeli independence, as they call it, and through that, in terms of the dispossession of Palestinians' property, and so the idea that families would be living with each other and all living in the same area, you go from a refugee camp, your village, your town is essentially, you're expelled from there. Families are going to stay with each other, and there's a tremendous amount of options in terms of where to go in an area that is a little bit bigger than Manhattan, twice the size of Manhattan in some ways.
Detroit size, 141 square miles.
And so it's very likely when Israel drops a bomb on an apartment building, you're going to be taking out whole families, and extended families. And I can't even
This is why scholars are calling it crimes of genocide for that reason.
I can't even begin to, and you'll notice that on this, he's on Good Morning Britain. It's all has this sort of surreal feel. And they write, Ahmed has lost 21 family members as if he was at the mall and he can't find them.
Yep.
As opposed to Ahmed's, had 21 family members killed by Israeli bombing. That's what really is there. But listen to this exchange. It's sort of, it is.
The follow-up question from this female
amazing.
reporter. What is her name here? Do we have it on the sound sheet? It is Kate Garraway.
Yeah, it really
disgusting.
Extraordinary.
Because I believe that some of the major Western media outlets are actually complicit in this war crime that Israel is committing against us.
Complicit in what way?
They provided Israel with the cover and atmosphere to do the massacres against us. The coverage has never been adequate on Palestine. There has been a lot of misinformation. There has been a lot of lies about what actually happened, not only in this conflict, not only since the 7th of October, but for 75 years of the conflict.
Now, you're talking about we, speaking as a Palestinian. Israel's very clear that this is against Hamas, a terrorist organization that perpetrated the most horrific atrocities. I can understand why you, in the absolute vortex of your grief, feel anger. But
I'm gonna pause it for 1 second. Can we just how do you tell somebody that no, you're wrong? 21 members of your family, your nuclear family, your extended family, have been killed, and you're wrong as to who the war is being waged against. And then to go into this thing of you're not being rational because you're so upset about the 21 your family members being killed, as if the response by Israel is completely rational,
dispassionate,
and dispassionate. Just go back a little bit. This is
I mean, she starts the question and says, "You say we." She's about to go down the road of saying, "Are you sympathetic with Hamas?" and then catches herself slightly. But if an Israeli was sitting there, one of the family members of someone who was slaughtered by Hamas, you really think that would be her reaction?
Of course.
If that family member said, I do feel that Hamas is responsible, you think that would be her reaction? Or is there some deep racism that is embedded in all of this coverage?
It's very clear that this is against Hamas, a terrorist organization that perpetrated the most horrific atrocities. I can understand why you, in the absolute vortex of your grief, feel anger. But what can be done for the sake of all those there? Because what we don't want to get into is a war of words and hate, do we?
Of course. We don't want a war of war or hate, but we need to be clear about something. This is not a war against Hamas. My family are not Hamas. My 14 nieces and nephews who are children, all under the age of 13, ranging from 1 to 13, are not Hamas. And they were killed. They were brutally killed while they were asleep. This is not a war against Hamas. This is a war against the Palestinian people. And it has been always against the Palestinian people. My father is 75 years old, and he was born a few months after the Nakba. Do you know what the Nakba is? The Nakba is the year in which Israel, the Zionist militias, forcibly displaced 750,000 Palestinian people from their homes and lands to create the state of Israel. This is what actually happened. We have been living under this war and conflict and onslaught and massacres for a long time, and it is right now.
And
it is
your
the time to
father
stop
was
that.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's, the idea that there are these stories getting out now and sort of like leaking through the mainstream press in this way.
Yeah, can we put up that CNN article actually? That I sent?
Is a big change. It's a big change. I mean, I said this early days back when I was in Vegas when this first hit, and I had a lot of time to sit in my hotel room and watch CNN. And I remember thinking like, oh, I've seen this before. Like, I know, like within 48 hours, I knew the names of like 3 different IDF spokespeople. And they had, one had a British accent, and one had an American accent, and one had an Israeli accent. But his English was pretty impeccable. And this, for a long time was one of the advantages that Israel had, among others, in terms of like being able to present its case to the United States, let's say, was that Israel was very European in its in its presentation.
Yeah.
And people, the vernacular, and just like it was easier for people in the West to interview these people and get their story out, as opposed to the Palestinians who wouldn't just simply did not have the same sort of like familiarity and with Western media, and there wasn't the savvy and et cetera, and that has changed.
Yeah.
That has changed over the past 20, 25 years or so, where. I mean, you still, you had people obviously like Edward Said and others, but in terms of being able to hear from a wide range of Palestinians, and that's on Good Morning Britain.
Yeah.
That guy's
Yeah.
on.
I was going to mention Said. There's a documentary I was watching last night that's available on YouTube, Edward Said in Palestine, 1988. People can look up. And there's 2 parts that they're so like, this part reminds me of that so much, like his treatment in the media. One, it's him on like a Maury Povich type panel show. and there's a Israeli spokesperson there, and the immediate framing of the conversation is, this Israeli spokesperson is here even though Edward Said is part of the PLO and they're terrorists, and that's like the hill he has to climb up immediately. And there's another part of the documentary where he's telling this story about like, and it's like a dark humor, Palestinian dark humor about like, they call us terrorists no matter what we do and whatever like that, and he's telling this whole like joke, and at the end of it the person filming is like, but you denounce terror, right? And it's like,
that's the same that we saw at the start of this, and it's, as to Sam's point, it's slowly eroding, right? Remember we covered all those clips, like with, do you condemn Hamas? Do you condemn Hamas?
even though your family just died, yeah.
It's the same thing, right? That you saw. And it's the notion that Palestinians have to be perfect victims in order to get sympathy, but it is eroding, thankfully. One, I mean, people be able to tell their own stories too. Social media and the internet has changed everything. When Palestinians and people in Gaza are able to film the atrocities, and we've all seen way too many things that we'll never forget. But that's the fact is that's what people are experiencing. And just quickly, I just have to show this image because another effort at humanizing these Palestinian Americans, or these Palestinians. Palestinian American family mourns 42 relatives killed in a single day in Gaza. You can see the photo of this family here. And that is an American who's never going to forget that their government was complicit in funding the killing of 42 members of that person's family.
That's not how you fight a terror organization. Massacre civilians.
Do we even care that there are Palestinian Americans in this country that are sitting by and understanding that their tax dollars are going towards bombs that are killing their family? And like, we're censuring Rashida Tlaib, who has Palestinian family, who knows that she's a part of the government that is greenlighting the weapons that are going to kill her own family. And this is like the person that we need to be condemning here. Understand what that must feel like. What must that feel like for a Palestinian American? And there are Palestinian Americans.
Yeah, a lot.
A lot.
Let's go to this clip. This clip number 4. I think the Ta-Nehisi Coates has been interviewed in other places too, but this is him on Democracy Now! And he's talking about, I mean, what's interesting is that it's also I feel like the first time that, you know, I don't know that Democracy Now! Is necessarily, it's not mainstream media, but certainly Ta-Nehisi Coates is a mainstream figure.
He was at The Atlantic, right?
Yes.
Considering what their output recently.
I mean, he is like... Obama has spoken about reading Ta-Nehisi Coates.
Yeah, I mean, he is, and to hear him talking in this way, and it for folks who listened to this program before, or years ago, or familiar with Michael's work, the construction of this is also going to sound like eerily familiar in some respects. But Ta-Nehisi Coates is on, and we're starting this clip about 4 or 5 minutes into it from Democracy Now! But he starts off by saying, before I went to Gaza, he visited Gaza. I'm not sure when this was, a year or two ago.
I think it was
recently.
the West Bank, if I'm not mistaken. This time.
This time? Okay. He said, West Bank, I'm sorry. He said, before I visited, I was under the impression that this conflict, as it were, the occupation, et cetera, was very complicated. And just before we get to this point in the clip, he's relating his experience in traveling around with a Palestinian guide in the West Bank, in moments where the Palestinian guide is like, I can't walk down that street. You can go, but I cannot walk down that street. And the lack of freedom of mobility, et cetera, et cetera. And then let's pick it up here.
It's very, very poor. Its market area has been shut down, but there are a few vendors there that I wanted to support. And I was walking to try to get to the vendor, and I was stopped at a checkpoint. Checkpoints all through the city. Checkpoints obviously all through the West Bank. Your mobility is completely inhibited, and the mobility of the Palestinians is totally inhibited. And I was walking to the checkpoint, and an Israeli guard stepped out, probably about the age of my son. And he said to me, "What's your religion, bro?" And I said, "Well, I don't, you know, I'm not really religious." And he said, "Come on, stop messing around. What is your religion?" I said, I'm not playing. I'm not really religious." And it became clear to me that unless I professed my religion and the right religion, I wasn't going to be allowed to walk forward. So he said, "Well, okay, so what was your parents' religion?" I said, "Well, they weren't that religious either." He says, what were your grandparents' religion?" And I said, "My grandmother was a Christian." And then he allowed me to pass. And it became very, very clear to me what was going on there. And I have to say, it was quite familiar. Again, I was in a territory where your mobility is inhibited, where your voting rights are inhibited, where your right to the water is inhibited, where your right to housing is inhibited, and it's all inhibited based on ethnicity. And that sounded extremely, extremely familiar to me. And so the most shocking thing about my time over there was how uncomplicated it actually is. Now, I'm not saying the details of it are not complicated. History is always complicated. Present events are always complicated. But the way this is reported in the Western media is as though one needs a PhD in Middle Eastern studies to understand the basic morality of holding a people in a situation in which they don't have basic rights, including the right that we treasure most, the franchise, the right to vote, and then declaring that state a democracy. It's actually not that hard to understand. It's actually quite familiar to those of us with a familiarity to African American history.
Well,
I mean, at the end of the day, that has not necessarily, well, not unnecessarily either, but it's not directly related to this, well, I guess it is directly related, but it is, I guess the point is to hear context from which these events take place and to hear them, articulated by someone who is a broadly considered a very mainstream figure, I think, in Ta-Nehisi Coates. I think is, that is also a change.
And as a black man, I mean, it's not complicated. Michael said it best, and he reiterates those points there. But there have been decades and decades of solidarity with the Palestinian cause by many black activist groups in this country. Malcolm X spoke about Palestinians, and then you can look internationally at the solidarity that Nelson Mandela had with Palestinians. In order to really grasp what we are dealing with here, you have to understand the perspective of colonized people and formerly colonized people and black and brown people and what they see when they look at what is happening in Gaza and in just like the actual, quotidian day-to-day of living in the West Bank and Gaza and living in Israel. It is the reality of apartheid. That's what he's talking about there. And yes, there are, Palestinians within Israel who do vote and they have some representation in the Knesset, but the 2.4 million in Gaza?
Separate roads. I mean,
it's
not controversial. It's a Jim Crowite. I mean, Zionism as an exclusionary Jewish supremacist ideology is like the lost cause, except we continue to fund it and support it materially. And Ta-Nehisi also was motivated to do this by, in the case for reparations, he mentions Israel as a affirmative way of like, I haven't revisited case for reparations, but he said in the other talk that he gave that he mentioned Israel as an example of reparations being practically pursued. And he said he regrets that because he said that before actually visiting Israel. And yeah, that's where we're at.
He said this in terms of like Israel getting reparations?
like this was how the world, like, reparations are pursued by
Israel. The gifting of this of the country is a reparation of some sort.
Exactly.
I mean, It was, but it's not necessarily as successful as one would have
Exactly.
hoped.
Precisely.
Exactly.
All right, let's just end it on or a bit before we head into the fun half, let's end it on, I don't know if this is cheery, but
Ramp up the fun, at least.
it is more, it's encouraging. This is, yesterday, there was a big interfaith demonstration at the 30th Street station in Philadelphia to demand a ceasefire in Gaza. Again, big protest in Washington, 2 p.m. Tomorrow, Freedom Plaza. But this is in Philadelphia yesterday.
Multiracial, intergenerational movement. We are here to demand ceasefire now. 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 Ceasefire now.
Someone I am saying would Hamas accept a ceasefire, and I think I don't think that the expectation is necessarily that there's not going to be any fire between both sides. I don't think the expectation is that if Hamas launches a rocket from somewhere that Israel won't necessarily respond. But we're watching the undeniable. I mean, I guess someone could argue it is discriminated and that they're choosing places. But when you have taken out over 50% of the housing in 50% of the housing in the Gaza Strip, the words discriminate and indiscriminate don't mean anything anymore.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. If you are killing thousands of children and also thousands of adults who are not Hamas, again, like, you either at this point believe that it is both strategically sound and morally sound to drop a couple of nukes on the Gaza Strip because you will kill some Hamas fighters. You'll kill a lot of civilians, but I mean, if you don't think that there is any sort of like obligation to maintain any type of ratio or any obligation to, as long as there's Hamas fighters under the tunnels, above, below these apartment buildings or these schools or these refugee camps, as long as you think it's okay to do that, then you might as well just advocate for the dropping of bombs and save us all the time. And if you won't do that because you realize that it's both morally and strategically, morally reprehensible and strategically useless or horrible or ineffective or dangerous, then it becomes incumbent upon you to say, like, okay, when does it cross into that line? When does it go from acceptable to unacceptable?
What do you say to the folks who say, well, it's on Hamas to release the hostages and to stop using, quote, human shields?
I mean,
because that's what you will get in response to what you're saying. I mean, I find it morally repugnant. I'm just trying to flesh it out for the audience.
Well, I mean, you either accept the premise of, like, this is collective punishment and you're using these civilians as leverage, and it is on Hamas to release the hostages. But these civilians are dying because of the bombs. And what again?
Like, how do you pursue the hostage release?
If the concept of human shield is Hamas is there, then again, it's basically then you need to come out and just say you are okay with killing every single civilian in Gaza, 2.4 million people, to get to the 40,000 Hamas fighters.
Yeah, admit it.
We have to say, the hostage families have said we should do a hostage transfer with the Palestinians that are held in Israeli cells. Like that.
Hamas has had. There are terms in which you could do the prisoner exchange. That's certainly where they have started.
That's what diplomacy is. And the human shields thing, just for people to maybe just be able to counteract this in conversations that you're having. This is recycled neocon propaganda that was used extensively during the war on terror and also deployed by the Bush administration in order to justify our illegal invasion of Iraq, saying that, well, what do you know? Sorry about these civilian casualties in Iraq. Saddam is using human shields.
Putin says it about Ukraine.
Netanyahu has stolen many things from the conservative, bloodthirsty movement in the United States. He learned a lot from Bush and from our response to 9/11. And if you think that killing hundreds of thousands of people in Iraq, a country that did not bomb us, that had nothing to do with 9/11, and killing all of those civilians was justified, well, then you'll be on the side of Israel. But if you have an understanding historically of what we did there and you are still on the side of Israel, I implore you to acknowledge that cognitive dissonance and choose to maybe try to examine that.
I do want to point out Data and Society, formerly a Data and Society researcher, Becca Lewis, is at the Port of Oakland, and there's an action there going. Please retweet. I'm here at the Port of Oakland with Bay Area community members protesting the delivery of weapons to Israel. At least one ship worker has walked off. So I just want to point that out.
That's awesome.
If you're in Oakland, great work.
Support these folks.
All right, we're going to take a break and head into the fun half.
Yes.
As it were. I don't know if we'll get time for phone calls, but we'll see. We'll certainly read some IMs. We got some more clips. Just a reminder, it is your support that makes this show possible. You can become a member at jointhemajorityreport.com. When you do, you not only get the free show free of commercials, you get the fun half too. If you listen to the show on a regular basis, if you want to support our work, help the show survive and thrive, becoming a member is the best way to do so. And then, of course, also, sending it around to folks. We have lost some listeners, they're certainly inevitable. It was stuff that is this sort of polarizing, which is fine. I think I am probably a little bit more sympathetic to people who have a hard time running into this stuff and sort of, trying to unlearn things that they have been, sort of raised to believe, and certainly experiencing it in just about every quarter of my life.
Yep.
But also, don't forget Just Coffee, fair trade, co-op coffee. Use the coupon code majority, get 10% off. I guess they don't have coffee and tea anymore.
No, tea and chocolate. They do have coffee.
Oh, they have coffee. Yeah, they don't have tea and chocolate anymore. They have hot cocoa. But Just Coffee is a great operation. It's co-op. It is I was out there a couple years ago now, and listening to how they really take care of their growers. I think it started with they were buying coffee from farms in Chiapas maybe 20, 30 years ago. And they you're farming coffee. Sometimes the weather doesn't agree with you. Sometimes there's a beetle infestation, or I don't know, some type. And growers go through hard times. Just Coffee, as a buyer, they work with these farms to make sure that they are not left. They don't hang these people out to dry. They work it and make sure that they can, support them and figure out ways sometimes. If they've got to sort of mess around with like sort of their formulations or stockpile some coffee, whatever it is, they really work with them. It's a great co-op, justcoffee.coop. Emma, ESVN, what's happening?
We gave our picks against the spread.
All
as we
Wemby
do
all the
every-
time. Oh, sorry.
We did talk about the Harden trade. We spoke about the Rangers winning the World Series. Now there's only 5 teams left that have not won the World Series. YouTube.com/ESVN show. Off the top of your head, can anybody remember? That's some fun sports trivia.
Can you?
Who are
I
the
can.
5 teams that
That have never won the World Series.
Let's see. Well,
I do this with the Super Bowl too. It's very fun.
Cincinnati?
no, they have.
The
The
Reds
Reds
have
have, yeah, definitely. Wait, the Cubs? Have the Cubs won?
Yeah.
They just won recently,
They just won,
right?
yeah. A few.
Let's see.
Pirates win one?
Pirates have won. I remember that. We Are Family. That was their big. It was like Willie Stargell back in the. I think it was in the late '80s.
Do you want me to get you going?
Have the Orioles?
I want to get
Yes.
one. Yeah, damn.
Blue Jays have won. I'm going
Yep.
through the American League. What used to be the American League East.
Brewers have won one.
No.
Oh,
It's
really?
One of the teams.
The Brewers haven't.
No, the Brewers have not.
Well, they contended a few times, but yeah.
All right, you want me to just say? Okay, the Brewers, the Tampa Bay Rays, the Seattle Mariners, the San Diego Padres, and now I'm forgetting the last one, the Rockies. The Rockies.
I'm surprised by
Yes.
all that.
There's also 4 NFL teams that have never been to a Super Bowl.
I don't even care.
Okay.
Vikings, right?
No, the Vikings have been.
Oh
They
yeah,
lost.
Fran Tarkenton.
Yeah.
Oh, God. Okay.
All right.
yeah.
Well, just for people, this is a fun game. Detroit Lions, Cleveland Browns in their current iteration, Houston Texans, and the Jacksonville Jaguars. 4 teams in the NFL have never been to a Super
Well,
Bowl.
half of those are new.
Yeah. Well, yeah. True.
Matt, left reckoning.
Oh, also, I just want to say quickly, it's my 3-year anniversary on the show.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Jeez, I meant to like
No. No. Wow. Thank
She was
happy.
offered a tour, sushi, and poker with the boys.
Yep.
She came running.
And I came running. Thank you, Zeke, for pointing that out. I would have never remembered, given the news, but it's been a great 3 years. Very, very happy here. Looking forward to many more years to come.
Yes, very happy to have you. Can't believe it's been 3 years. It both feels
It's been a
like
weird
it's-
3 years.
Both feels like it's been like 15 years and like 6 to 8 months.
Yes, exactly. So appreciate you all. Thanks so much for the support.
Big upgrade for the show. Matt, what's happening on Left Reckoning?
Yeah, Left Reckoning, we're going to be doing a clip show, including Michael Brooks clip and some other stuff about Israel-Palestine. Check it out. We did some scary stories. That's been a long time ago. We had a Halloween episode. So if you want me talking about seeing ghosts, patreon.com/Left Reckoning.
See you in the fun half.
You are in for it.
All right, folks, 646-257-3920. See you in the fun half.
Are you ready?
Who sent us this?
Alpha males are back. Boy is back. And the alpha males are back.
Just as delicious as you could imagine.
The alpha males are back. Boy is back. And the alpha males are back.
Just want to degrade the white man.
Alpha males are back.
I take all of it in my throat.
Alpha males are back.
Snowflake says what?
The alpha males are back.
You are a madman.
And the alpha males are back.
Oh no, Sam Seder! What a fucking nightmare!
Bring back DJ Danner.
Yeah, or a couple of them. Just put them in rotation.
DJ Danner.
Well, the problem with those is they're like 45 seconds long, so I don't know if they're enough of a break.
That's fucking nonsense. You see white people doing drugs that look worse than normal white people, and all white people look disgusting.
And the alpha males.
Psych. Fuck them. Fuck them. Snowflake says what? Snowflake says what? A hell of a lot of bank. A hell of a lot of bank. A hell of a lot of bank. Okay, I'm making stupid money. Hell of a lot of bank. A hell of a lot of bank.